Oh, wow, let it play. You got 5 minutes. So, and does everyone have something to write with? Everyone have something to write with? Great. Okay. Great. 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 Hello. Hi. Sure. Sure. I like Sly and the Family Stone, and I, I know why, but it's always surprising that other people don't like Sly the way I do.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Angie Morris, and I'm the HR manager at People Incorporated. So, welcome to those of you that are not from People Incorporated. We're glad that you were able to join us for this training today. Before I introduce our speaker, Andre Koen, just a couple housekeeping things first. Please make sure you sign in. And then there is an evaluation of People Incorporated, just so we can see how we're doing and what your needs might be. And then Andre will talk about, there's another action plan thing that he'll talk about as well. Coffee and water are here. Please help yourself. Restrooms, I think there are signs directing you to where the restrooms were. This afternoon or over lunch will be on your own. We'll allow about an hour for lunch, and there's lots of places in the area for lunch. So, and let's see, I think that's kind of the basic housekeeping. We'll be here all day and having a lot of fun.
Hopefully a
Right?
lot of fun. Yeah, yeah.
So, Andre Koen is an energetic presenter, a powerful communicator, and a dynamic teacher. His educational influence spans the North American continent. Andre integrates his abilities as an improvisational comedian, large group facilitator, keynote speaker, and classroom teacher to captivate and educate his audience. There's many words that define Mr. Andre Koen. The most representative, however, is Andre the Enkindled Spirit. Please welcome Andre Koen, President and founder of AM Horizon.
So there's a lot more that was added to that thing, and it's weird to have that stuff read about you. You know, like you should be in a box where you can't hear it. You know, it's just that kind of stuff. So. Given all those things, what I'd like to just let you know, and actually by the time we're done, you'll probably know more about me than you ever care to know, and certainly more about me than what people are able to see when they look at me. And I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity and taking time out of your day to have this very critical conversation. We're in a time that requires the best of us, and unfortunately, I seem to be seeing the worst of us at the same time. And one of the things that I've realized, because for a while I was frustrated, really frustrated with the things that I'm seeing in the political arena, right? So we have, fist fights, popping out of political rhetoric, and we have hate speech coming out of that thing. And I was really disillusioned because I said, this is worse than the 60s. Because at least in the 60s there was some movement and there were people that we could point to that were leading the way to something positive. But then something occurred to me. And one of the things that I realized is that I remember being doing a canoe trip on the St. Croix. And I'm not particularly a very strong swimmer. And we were taking some kids out, and the kids weren't necessarily strong swimmers, and we were all urbanites, right? So we came with our best urban gear. And how many people know that, blue jean overalls with Timberland boots are probably not the best things to go canoeing in, right? And why might that be? Because if you ever tip, that stuff soaks, and now you've got this additional weight on you, and you're trying to swim. And when you're not a particularly strong swimmer, that leads to some other things. So I'm thinking about this political environment that we're in, and I'm thinking about that time when I was in that canoe, and we tipped. And so all of these kids in their urban gear, and myself included, are in the water, and we're not strong swimmers. And the thing that came to my mind as we look at this stuff, I felt there was a part where I was afraid that I was going to drown because I'm not a strong swimmer and I'm being weighed down by my clothes. And then there was this part where I had no fear, and I said, no matter what it takes, I'm getting to the shore because I don't want to die here. And when I look at what's going on in our political environment, this is what I see. Racism is saying, I do not want to die. It's saying I don't want to die. It is on its last leg. It's giving its last gasp. It is fighting for its existence. But what do we know about what's going to happen to racism at some point? It's going to die. And so as we reflect fondly on the 60s, and we say those great, we think about those great things that happened. They started this thing, and what we're starting to see is that racism is taking its last breaths. The system of oppression that we knew before is gasping for its last breath, because there is something new that is going to be born. But the thing that has to happen is that we have to be prepared for that birth. When we see, it's funny, people talked about 2012 being, the Mayans. Anybody ever heard any of that stuff about the right? So I think it's interesting that as we watch this old thing die, we have to be prepared for what the new thing is going to be. And any of you that are related to parents, have been children, know that there's a certain kind of preparation that happens, and there are things that you'll never be prepared for as a parent and as a child. And so when I look at those things, I was discouraged for a while, but then I started to see that this is what happens when things are on their last breath, and they're striving and trying to hang on. But in this particular case, racism is going to die. It may not be in my lifetime, it may not be in my daughter's lifetime, but by golly, it is going to die. And it's funny, there's lots of pictures on me and all of my stuff, and people say, well, why do you put your picture on all your stuff? And I laugh and I say, when you do your stuff, you can put whatever picture you want on your things, But the main reason I do that is, I'm the only person that I have in my organization that I can put pictures up of. But secondly, my grandfather, he was a very proud and dignified man. Very proud and dignified man. And he took indignity and ate it for breakfast. His name was John Wesley. And for many of you who may not know, John Wesley was an abolitionist. And so in my family, most of us are Methodists because John Wesley was a Methodist and he was an abolitionist. So John and Wesley and any combination of John Wesley, or, sometimes it's the third middle name, but John Wesley continues to show up in my family. And I don't know that John is particularly exotic or difficult to pronounce. But my grandfather told me of stories where people would not call him John. They would call him George, because John was difficult to say. He told me of situations where boys or people who weren't qualified to call him a boy referred to him as boy. And how did my grandfather deal with that? He took the long road. He bit his tongue till it bled so that I could be born. And I'm not holding my tongue. I will speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves. I will continually be the advocate. Now, one of the things that I will have to say is that I am a male. I'm African American. I'm extremely humble and good looking. So I see the world in a particular way. I'm cisgender, which means I was born male and I identify as being a male, which gives me some privileges that I didn't ask for. It offers some hurdles, but it gives me some privileges as well. And so as we look at this, I want you to take those things in mind, that I am operating from a place that is balanced with privilege and with oppressive responses to an oppressive system. So there is that balance. So there may be some things that I don't get. There may be some things that I miss. But I want to be the best advocate that I can. And hopefully through this process, you will call me an ally. One of the things that we miss oftentimes in this work is that we say that we're allies, but that's not something you can say. That's what other people say about you. You can be an advocate until they say you're an ally. And so in my presentation, I don't have a lot of answers. I have some questions that I've been trying to respond to most of my life and for the students that I served. I worked just on the other side of St. Paul at a charter school called Skills for Tomorrow. It was a small charter school, and these were kids that could not or were not successful in big buildings. So they came to us for all sorts of different kinds of reasons. And they had some real questions for me. And as a teacher walking into the classroom, I thought I had all the answers until they started asking important questions. So the presentation I have for you are the answers to the questions that the students asked me. So I'm going to share with you what I learned from my students in this presentation. All right? So there's that. So it's very clear that you have handouts in front of you. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I am well prepared for the task at hand. But as important as I think my things are, and I'll get you a handout. You're very welcome. As important as I think my task is today, I'm also interested in questions that you may have or things that you were hoping we would talk about in this particular session. What did you hope we would talk about in this session?
I would say aside from what we do as individuals is what can we do as organizations.
In regards to what?
Into humanizing the human race.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Other folks, what did you hope we were going to talk about?
Those who aren't culturally the same as we are.
Okay.
How to connect with them.
Okay, so how to connect. Yes, ma'am.
Mutual identity development.
Okay. And how do you see that being not only something that we should talk about, but something that could be helpful in our conversation?
I think when we're working with individuals, sometimes we're not always understanding what stage of that development when someone's not part of the dominant culture and some of the specific unique struggles that an individual goes through.
Okay.
And so in relating, sometimes they can be perceived as aggressive when there's a lack of understanding.
Okay, cool. So I'll note that. Other things we were hoping we would talk about.
I guess in addition to learning how to connect, I'd like to learn how not to offend.
Okay, so to connect and not to offend. All right. Other folks. Yes.
I would say just a general not acceptance, but an appreciation and a love of differences.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be about, there can be some not connection, there can be some acceptance of how are we different, and how let's celebrate that.
All right.
Maybe the valuing piece
So the valuing of.
of differences.
Okay.
That
Other folks. Anything else? All right. Cool. Is there anything that you hope that we would not talk about? If you talk about it one more time, your head will pop off, or you'll scream if you have to talk about this thing one more time. Is there anything that you hoped that we would not talk about? All right, then it's all on the table. Good, 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 good. So the first thing I'd like for you to do is if you can open up your handout. And if you look at number 3, there are 5 gray circles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to write down one thing that is of value to you or important to you in each one of those circles. So one thing that is important or of value to you. It could be a concept like freedom or justice. It could be a place like Bemidji or Belize. It could be a thing like a motorcycle or a person like a significant other, grandchild. It could be a thing like a motorcycle or jet skis. So one thing that you value or one thing that is important to you in each one of those circles.
Just the little circles? Or
Yep, just the little gray circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gray circles. All right, it looks like most folks have 4, if not all 5. What I'd like to do is I'd like to play a game. And the game is very simple. What I want you to do is I want you to find a minimum of 2 different individuals to sign on each one of the things that you wrote down that they either agree with or that they like. So I think that that's a great idea that you wrote down Duluth as one of the places that you value or things that you value. I think that's a good idea. So I'll put my initials next to that. Hold on, just before you start, because I want to make sure everybody gets the same amount of time. Or that is similar to something that you have, right? So it's either similar or something that you appreciate that they have on their paper. And I'd like for you to get a minimum of 2 different people for each one of the things that you wrote down. You have 5 circles, which would mean you have a minimum of how many people? 10 people. And it'll be great if all 10 of those people were different. All right? If you can't do that, that's fine too. But let's shoot for that as our goal. All right? You have a total of 90 seconds to do this, starting now. Yes, I do count. Let's see. Oh, sweet. Friends. Thank you. Grant looking out upon the water. But you guys are everywhere. Yes.
So I have family, friends, ability to do meaningful work and make a living at it, travel, and health.
Oh, travel.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. $60. You know what? I didn't have time to fill one out, but I will sign yours.
All right.
Oh, nature.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What's going on, man? Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you. Good
as
to
well.
see
You're
you.
doing how many at MSSA?
3.
The whole week?
Yeah,
Okay.
doing the
Right.
day.
Okay. They spread mine out. I'm on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Oh, that's
Which-
grueling.
Yeah.
What
and
time
it's,
on Friday?
The last 2 sessions on
Okay.
Friday. So, which I
We're
think
at
you're on Friday.
yeah, I'm
as
doing
well,
the
right?
same,
Okay.
the
yeah,
same
'cause
time.
I always
So
look through to find your name, and inevitably, there's out of all of them that you do, there's always just one that I can sneak in.
yeah. No, I'm glad. And I get mad because I can't get to other people's, but I may try to sneak into some earlier sessions. So
Okay.
maybe I'll try it. One of yours.
Yeah, I'm first thing Wednesday morning.
Okay.
And then middle chunk of the day on Thursday, and then end of the day Friday. I've got
Okay.
5 of them.
Wow. What are your topics?
Harm reduction, ending stigma, creating lasting change, trauma, and ethics and boundaries.
Wow.
Yeah, I did the same thing that you did a while back.
Yep.
I proposed 5, hoping to get like maybe 2.
And they took all 5?
Yeah, and 2 of them that like the trauma and harm reduction. I've done trainings on harm reduction before, but the trauma one I figured, I'll throw that out. I got some ideas,
Yeah.
and if they pick it up, then I'll create something around it.
Yeah.
And then last week was like, shit, I have to do trauma. So it's gonna be a bunch of personal stories.
Yeah. Well, and you only have 100. You only have 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So, you know.
I can stutter for 90 minutes.
3, 2, 1, and game over. Game over. So we have it's funny to be at a so-called diversity training or whatnot, to have a diversity of people in the room. And so if you're with People Incorporated, if you can just raise your hand, that'd be great. All right, cool. If you're not with People Incorporated, can you just tell us what organization you're with?
City of Bloomington Human Services.
Oh, the City of Bloomington Human Services. Yes. Missions Incorporated in Plymouth. Yes.
Metro HRA.
Metro HRA.
Three of us. Northern Star Council Boy Scouts.
Northern Star Council Boy Scouts. Yes.
Harriet Tubman Domestic Violence Shelter,
Harriet Tubman Domestic Violence Shelter and
Dakota County CDA.
Dakota County CDA. Oh, CDA. Yes. Okay. Community Development. Okay. Cool. And who else? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Dakota County Social Services.
Oh, Dakota County Social Services. Sweet. So, as many of you may or may not know, I worked in Anoka County. I was their affirmative action officer for 8 years or so. And so I have a love and an affinity for government and government work, which has kind of lended itself to this idea of working with people who help other people, because that is the point of government. And so I'm glad to see my government counterparts here. Like, what? Back to our game. So as you were going around the room, so first of all, was there anybody that was able to find their minimum of 10? Sweet. Anyone able to find obviously more than 10? And what was what was your number? 14? Okay, yes? 19. She's like killer networker. Anyone have more than 19? No? What do you have in the back, ma'am? 12. You have 12. Okay, great. So as you were walking around the room and you were reading other people's things, were there things that you saw on other people's papers and you were like, man, why didn't I think of that? I should have wrote that down. What were some of those things that you saw on other people's paper and you were like, ugh, I should have had a V8? Yes. Nature. All right. What else? Yes. Travel. Compassion. Integrity. Mountain biking. Literature. Acceptance. Sweet. Were there also things that as you were going around the room that were either difficult to find someone to sign on, or you actually didn't get anyone to sign on that particular circle? Was there an example of that? Yes. Portland, Oregon. So if you would have signed Portland, Oregon, had you seen it, raise your hand. If you okay, great. So you have more people who value Portland, Oregon. All right. Was there something else? Yes. If you breathe, I just want to tell you, if you breathe, I'm pointing at you. Right? Yes.
I had heritage. I did get signatures, but I had to keep.
You had to keep going around. So if you're, and you meant family heritage? All right. So if your family heritage is of value to you, even if you don't know it, but if it's of value to you, please raise your hand. All right. Cool. Yeah. One more thing that was either difficult to find someone to sign on, or you didn't find someone to sign on. Your cabin, right? Cabins in general, right? So if you value, and I would imagine that cabins represent leisure, right? So if you value leisure at some point, I mean, I know you're all hardworking people, but if you value leisure, even if you didn't write it on your paper, please raise your hand. All right, sweet. So what do you think is the moral or the lesson of this particular activity? Like, why would I start out this particular session with an activity like this?
To show we're more similar than we think.
To show that we're more similar than we think? That we have similar values.
Sometimes we don't articulate it the same way, but underneath we are more the same than we are different.
So maybe we don't articulate it the same way, but underneath we're more the same than we are different. You guys are brilliant. Or that you don't know about those values, or you don't know about those similarities, or even those differences. You don't know about them until you engage with someone else, right? Yeah, no.
Not always what we think either. You know, sometimes the things that people mention aren't the maybe top things that I would have thought of. There's something else.
Yeah.
Or Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. Maybe they're not the top five. Now, what I would assume, I make this assumption, that you did a mix of things. You have your highest priority things that you value, and then you have just kind of, random things that you value, and that if you were like me, you may have mixed those things up and just selected 5 and wrote those things down. And I would imagine that you value more than 5 things. Would that be a safe assumption? Yeah. So out of all of those things, I think that it's very interesting that you are actually able to find connections with other human beings. If you were to do this particular activity with your clients, what do you think you would find? Similarities, same things, right? They may be identified a little bit differently, but at their core, they're similar. So I'm really intrigued by this, because I would make the assumption that all of our parents don't know each other. Would that be a safe assumption? Right? Yeah, right? That we all didn't grow up in the same communities, the same households, didn't eat cereal the same way, buttered our toast differently. But how is it that we're able to come up with these things and make these connections? because we're human, we're people. One of the things that oftentimes happens, and I've sat in chairs very much like the seats you're sitting in and heard a person present like I'm presenting, and I have found oftentimes that we spend a lot of time talking about our differences and not enough time talking about the ways in which we are alike. And so I like to balance those things today, that we're both and, right? We can be more than one thing at one particular time. And so that lends me to this idea of cultural humility. And cultural humility basically says that I don't know everything. And guess what? I won't know everything. But I have to be humble enough to know that I should probably ask. If there's anything you take away from, this idea of being culturally competent, I want you to take out the skill of being able to ask. To ask. So we're going to move on. So we'll come back to that game in just a second. What is the most valuable non-renewable resource on the planet?
Could it be the human soul?
It is in fact the human soul, the most valuable non-renewable resource. Now, I don't want to get into, metaphysics or, esoteric thinking and whatnot, but I do want to say that there is only one you. Ask your parents, and they're probably grateful that there's only one you. I don't know if you can imagine me being twins. That would be like, whoa, what do we do with this one, right? These two. Yeah, no, the human soul. And so when I think about that, what I start to understand is that nation states are formed, kingdoms are formed to harness the power of the human soul. Of the human soul. And, teaching middle school and teaching high school, I had to come up with some simplistic ways to talk about some pretty fancy stuff. And so if some of the things that I present to you seem to be simplistic, then I've done my job. Right? So this idea of the human soul, and I take this particular model of the human soul, that the human soul is comprised of two parts. It is the physical body, right? It's the house that we've inherited. And it is the animating spirit that's within us. And whether that, whatever happens to that animating spirit, once the body stops working, you can find out for yourself. But there is clearly something that animates this that is separate from this. And I give this example from the passing of my grandmother. So I love my grandmother, a wonderful woman. I misunderstood her for the majority of my life because I thought my grandmother was nasty. I did. I thought she was nasty. Because she would do like bizarre stuff. Like we'd spend the night at her house on Saturday nights, and Sunday morning she would get her jelly jar out, and there would be mold in the jelly. And my grandmother would scoop out the mold, throw it away, and then serve the jelly. Or there'd be cheese that had some mold on the cheese, and she just cut the mold off and then served the cheese. And as a kid, I thought that was nasty. Until I understood that she grew up in the Great Depression, and you didn't throw away good food. And so she went misunderstood for the majority of my life. But when she passed, we have this custom in my family. And many of your families may share a similar custom where we spend way too much on a box that we will never use. And so her box has eagle claws on each of the corners, and it's got a pearl inlay, so you can look at it in different directions and see different shimmers and all sorts of stuff. And so they stuffed my grandmother in this box, and they put way too much makeup on my grandmother, and that was not her best wig. It was not her best wig. And so they put her in there, and they put her in front of this the group of people, and people come by to give my grandmother their last wishes. So they come by and they give her their last wishes. And so some people talk to my grandmother, and they say stuff to her. Some people slip my grandmother notes. And then other people, you always have that one family member that wants to touch the body, right? It's like, she didn't want to touch you when she was alive. Leave her alone now, So we have that thing going on. But as people were talking to my grandmother and giving notes to my grandmother, how was my grandmother responding?
She was quiet.
She was very quiet. She didn't respond. Why?
Wasn't there.
Because nobody was home. So the body, without the spirit, the body becomes a thing. And later we would gather at my grandmother's house for spaghetti dinner, and everybody would bring their version of spaghetti. I just want to tell you, you don't eat everybody's version of spaghetti, right? It's just, ugh. But we sit there and we open up the photo album and we're looking at pictures and we're laughing and we're telling jokes, and I'm keeping my cousins from stealing the ashtrays that my grandmother hadn't used for 25 years. But it's still her ashtrays. You can't steal her ashtrays. And so as we're doing all this stuff and we're telling these stories and we're laughing and we're joking, it feels like my grandmother is there. But she can't animate anything. And so when the human soul is perfect, is when the body and the spirit are jointly related, that there's a good relationship. And when the spirit is separate of the body, the spirit becomes powerless. So when this separation starts to happen, we have something that we call dis-ease. We have dis-ease. Fácil means what in Spanish? Easy. When we have a separation between the body and the spirit, we have dis-ease. It's not easy. It is difícil, difficult. Right? So when we have a crack in this human soul, a void forms. And when the void forms, there is a monster that is waiting for this void to form. It is salivating. It is excited about this formation of the void. And do we know what that void is called? It is called free market capitalism. It's waiting for the void. What does free market capitalism say? What's a suggestion around this void? We have to fill it. And not only do we have to fill it, but capitalism says what? Buy this stuff and it will fill the void. Have you ever seen a commercial that actually makes you feel better about being a human being? Most of them are telling you how your hair isn't enough of this. Or if you drink this, or you take this. And I think it's really funny because you'll see some of these news programs and they create so much anxiety and you're like, ah! And then they have an antidepressant or anti-gastro medication right at the commercial, right? I think that's so funny, right? Yeah. So free market consumerism or capitalism is waiting for this void. But how much stuff can you buy to fill the void, to make the human soul whole again? We've had avatars that have taught us that this doesn't work. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Janis Joplin, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Robin Williams. That hurt. That hurt. all my life, I've known Robin Williams, right? Work from Ork, right? Hurt. So we know that when we're working with our clients, part of the things that they're operating in is this disillusionment because they know that what the world tells them about what makes them healthy isn't working. And so they come to us and they say, I've tried this, and I smoked this, and this is supposed to make me feel better, but it's not working. I've slept with these number of people, and it's supposed to be helping me, but it's not helping me. I've tried this lifestyle or that lifestyle. I've been there. I've moved to this place, but this stuff isn't working. Why? Because we're oftentimes not trying to unite the soul. And, I remember this came back to me as I, was preparing for this and some other sessions. This came back to me, and it really made me think. It made me think. I was watching, so when I was in elementary school, there was a mini-series on, which I think is interesting because it was 3 hours a night for 2 weeks, for 10 days, 3 hours a night. I don't know what a maxi-series would have been like, right? But it was a mini-series based on a book written by Alex Haley. And the book was entitled Roots, right? And so in this opening episode, they have captured a young man from North Africa, actually from West Africa, and are conditioning him for the economic system of slavery. They're conditioning him for this economic system of slavery. And so the young man is played by LeVar Burton. And if anybody's ever watched Reading Rainbow, he's the Reading Rainbow guy, take a look, it's in a book, a Reading Rainbow. I can do anything. Okay, anybody? Okay, right. So he's also the Geordie LaForge on Star Trek, right? So yeah, right. And I always wondered why he would have to wear these visors if he's in the future. Like, why would he have to be blind in the future when, But so later they took off the thing and he could see with future eyes. It was just interesting, right? So they have this young man conditioning him for the system of slavery, and they have him tied up, and the conditioner has this just medieval, just horrible thing in his hand, and he hits him. And he goes, and when he hits him, he says, "What is your name?" And LeVar Burton says, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the conditioner says, "No, your name is Toby." Right? And so this continues on. "What is your name? My name is Kunta Kinte." Right? So finally, they're on their last. And the conditioner hits them. And he says, "What is your name?" And LeVar Burton, hanging there, says, "My name is Toby." What happened? They broke his soul, separating his spirit from his body, and now his body has become a thing. One of the things that, I'm all about women's lib, and I love Wonder Woman as a character. I'm glad they're putting more clothes on her and whatnot, just because all the other, but their underwear is on the outside. Anyway, so love that. Love that. Try to be an advocate in whatever way I can, particularly to my sisters, to my mothers and my grandmothers. I try to be as best of an advocate as I can. And so one of the things that I find interesting is that there are good men Men who would consider themselves to be good, who go to these things called gentlemen's clubs. Right? And they don't go to those clubs to be gentlemen. There's nothing gentlemanly about what happens in those clubs. But they go to those clubs. And why do they go to, why do these men who consider themselves to be good men go to these clubs? How are they able to justify going to these clubs? Somebody knows somebody who's gone to one of those clubs before, right? Yeah. Because they don't know anybody there. I was one of those dudes. It was a rite of passage. I mean, it was just what dudes did. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what other guys told us, that this is the kind of stuff we're supposed to. It's the stuff we saw on TV. It's stuff our friends talked about. Whether they really did it or didn't do it, we didn't know. But that's what you're supposed to do. And I remember going to this place. So in my young adult days, I lived in St. Louis, and there across the river from St. Louis is a place called East St. Louis. And East St. Louis is such a depressive place that if you can afford it, you can do it. You can do it. So my best friend was coming, and I'm still, evolving as a human being. I wasn't quite as human as I am today. And so we're going to celebrate by going to a strip club. Because in that strip club, they take it all off. Ooh! Right? So we get in there, we take our seats. And we pay $7 for a Coke. A piece. $7 Coke. And so we're standing there and we're just like, oh yeah, here it comes. And so the lady comes out and she's da 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 da, and she winks. And so she's doing her thing. She turns around. She's like, oh, and we're like, oh, look at that! Oh my goodness, look at it! And we didn't put no money out yet, but we're like, oh, and so I'm hitting him in the elbow. He's hitting me. We're talking. Oh my goodness! And so she, she gets, and then she takes off her top. We're like, oh, look at that! Oh my goodness! Oh, right? And so we're like, and she's and she's doing her thing, and she turns around, and then she, drops her pants, and then she turns around, and she does her thing, and my buddy and I, we look at each other, and we go, oh my goodness, what have we done? We're just shocked. We looked at each other, and we're just shocked. The woman had a scar from here to here. This was somebody's mama. It was somebody's daughter, somebody's sister. We got up and we left. We've had 2 conversations about it since. It was the most humiliating and embarrassing thing for us. I can't imagine what it must have been like for the woman to get the courage to be able to have to know that she has to do that in order for goofy dorks like us to give up our money so that she can feed her babies. I can't imagine what that must be like, but I did understand that I wasn't there to celebrate her humanity because she wasn't a human to me. She was a thing. And what do people call those things? There's a name for them. Strippers. She wasn't a human being, she was a stripper. It breaks my heart when I hear people talk about young people and they say, well, that young person was a thug. Wait a minute. You just turned a human being into a thing. So part of our job is to help reunite this humanity, to give people back what they think that they've lost. And why do they think that they've lost it? Because we suffer from obstacle illusions. Obstacle illusions, artificial barriers to authentic human relations. We suffer from those things. What is an obstacle illusion? Race is an obstacle illusion. The fact that my skin color may be different than yours, or my hair texture might be different, or my nose, the width of my nose might be different, that is important for you to understand how other people relate to me. But that doesn't make us any different. Let's go back to your game. I'm going to ask 3 questions because this fulfills my hypothesis about how we start to reunite this human soul. And I just want to test this out and see if my hypothesis remains to be true. So please raise your hand if you can answer yes to these next 3 questions. Out of the 5 things that you wrote down as things that you value, was there anything that would be identified on a human resource form associated with your race or ethnic identity? Is there anything there that would be your race or ethnic identity on an HR form, human resource form? No. Okay, cool. Is there anything there that specifically identifies your gender or gender identity? Anything specific that would identify your gender or gender identity? Okay, so I have 1 person. All right. Lastly, for this one, I want you to jump up in the air and wave your hands like you don't care, but not you. Is there anything that the IRS would indicate or could be an indication of your social economic status as determined by the IRS? No. So why is it do you think that your racial or ethnic identity didn't show up, or for most of us our gender or gender expression didn't show up, or lastly our social economic status? Why did those 3 things not show up when I ask you to write down your values? Because they really aren't important? Why did you not write those things down? So at some extent, we take them for granted.
Because core values are shared by everyone. Doesn't matter race, gender, economic status.
So core value, there are some core values that we all share, regardless of other things. All right. Why else?
Some of it is body related.
Okay, so some of it is body related and not soul. I would also suggest that you are smart for not writing those things down. And you're smart because of 2 things. One is that of all the things that you could value, those don't rank as high as these other things. I'm not saying that they're not important, but they're not as important as the things that you wrote down. And secondly, I would imagine that some of you may have been afraid to write some of those things down for what other people might say about you. And I want to, relieve your fear around that, because people will still say whatever they want to say about you. Right? So when it comes down to it, we have this combination that we suffer from these obstacle illusions, that we think that we're so much different when in fact we're not, that these core values are important, and they may show up and be demonstrated differently and may need to be responded to differently, but that's the task that we've said that we're going to take. We're going to take that task. We're going to wrestle with those things, and we're going to help those folks in ways that make the most sense for them, right? So we're going to help heal their soul. And so we've had institutions that said that they are going to help take responsibility for that. And we'll talk about those institutions in just a second. I want to talk a little bit about schools of thought, and where we'll be kind of taking our leaning. There are There's this school of thought around white privilege versus people of color, internalized oppression. There's this spectrum. There is this idea of cultural competence versus cultural destructiveness, where people actively work to destroy other cultures. There are monocultural mindsets and this idea of intercultural mindsets, where monocultural is about simplicity, and intercultural mindsets are about the complexity of our relationships. There's this idea of knowledge, skills, and abilities, and the other end of the spectrum is this idea of sensitivity training. And so I'm going to do my best to work through a number of these schools of thought simultaneously as we move forward through our workshop today. And I will also make available this PowerPoint, so you don't have to feel rushed or pressured to write down too many notes if you just want to make note of some of the things that we've talked about. And so one of the things that we have to offer is I thought that these iDevices were technological marvels. Absolutely the most magical things I've ever used. Anybody have one of these iDevices? Right? Anybody have the Android devices? Any of those? Right. Are those? Do you know how those things work? Like if they took them apart and put them all on the page, and you had to put them back together and make it work, could you do? No, I couldn't do that, right? So as far as I'm concerned, it's magic. But I have a master's degree in educational technology, so how to use technology and all this great stuff, right? And so I have my iDevices at the house, and I'm just kind of doing my stuff, working on presentations, and I lay my device down. My daughter, who is 18 months. Picks up my device, puts in the code, swipes, finds Elmo, hits Elmo, and is watching the stuff. And I'm like, I thought this thing was fancy. I have a master's degree, and I'm just learning how to work it. Here she is, she can barely talk, and she can operate my thing. And one of the things that I found out is, through that, just watching that, is that as sophisticated as these Apple devices are, or these electronic devices are, be it an Android or Apple device, they are designed, with all of their technological advances, they're designed to be very simple. And so that got me to thinking, when we talk about these ideas of cultural competence and we talk about diversity stuff, we make it so complicated. It's so hard I don't know what to call people anymore. I don't know, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate to call these people. And what I like to introduce you to is a concept called diversity elegance. Have you ever seen a ballet dancer do their thing? I mean, when the dudes hold up and the ladies are doing the thing, it's very interesting to watch that stuff because they make it seem so simple. Have you ever tried to do it yourself? So this idea of diversity elegance is taking these very complex ways of thinking and being, but making it user-friendly for people, right? Diversity elegance. And so what I like for you to think about is, how do you take these concepts that we're using and make them elegant? How do you make them user-friendly for folks? White privilege, the concept of white privilege is a great concept. It's a sound concept. It is not user-friendly. How do you tell a kid from Frogtown, a white kid from Frogtown, who has been oppressed just like his Latino, Hmong, and black brothers and sisters, that he's got privilege that they don't? And it may very well exist. But we have to have a more critical conversation. We have to have some elegance in how do we bring those folks along. One of the things that I can see now is that for the last 16 years that President Barack Hussein Obama has been president, there's been a large group of folks who have felt that they have not had a voice. And now they seem to feel like they have a voice. And how do we get those brothers and sisters back? How do we bring them back into the fold and say this is what's best for all of us? So this idea of cultural humility or diversity elegance basically is one that constructs the understanding of developing a process-oriented approach to competency. It is conceptualized cultural humility as the ability to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other-oriented and open to others in relation to aspects of cultural identity that are most important to the observer, right? So to the person. So being able, this idea of cultural humility, this diversity elegance is really about being able to be open to other ways of being and not being threatened by other ways of being, right? So one of the things that we'll kind of talk about is the Bennett model of cultural development and moving from monocultural mindsets to intercultural mindsets, and this idea of denial, polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. And I'll talk about this too, this idea of Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, it actually moves along this continuum, and we can see where some conflict happens when we move along this continuum. In the Bennett model, the monocultural mindset misses differences. It's a denial. The differences aren't important. Let's not talk about differences. Polarization starts to talk about, one difference is better than another difference. This idea of minimization de-emphasizes differences and says people are people, no matter what color. I don't see color. I'm colorblind, therefore I'm a good person. Acceptance is this idea that I understand differences, so I know what day Cinco de Mayo is on. Where adaptation says, I know how to cross bridges. I know how to work with folks across cultural boundaries. I know when to assimilate, when to imitate, when to be adaptive to those environments. So we'll talk about that more a little later. Okay, so we'll do this one last piece, and then we'll take a break. So no, let's take the break now. We'll take the break now, and we'll come back with this. You've been sitting long enough. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. I'm making a beeline for the bathroom.
Beelining, but